I know what we're both thinking, yes, more Frieren, finally. Frieren was a surprise hit with me the last time I watched it. It basically looked me in my face and said, hey, all of these prejudices you hold against magical elves and anime can be wrong if the magical elves anime is actually good, you fat idiot. And I said, there's simply no way. But lo and behold, I ended up liking it quite a bit. There are multiple positives to posting these videos in a by-opening format, because not only do I get to stop and think about why the show is doing well or not, I get to read comments on why people agree or disagree with me, or why they think the next batch of episodes is good or bad, without spoiling anything though, right guys? Right? And from what I gleaned from the comments from last video is that while most people still think it is good moving forward, they also think that I may not enjoy them as much for a couple of reasons. Don't worry, I've not let these comments poison the well. I'm still going in with a completely open mind, probably with a much better attitude than when I started the show, so I'm sure we'll be just fine. Let's see what I think. Ooh, okay, I know everyone was just fucking tickled on my last Frieren video. Haha, so-called anime hater, you like a show about feelings and animated witches. What are you, soft? I was horribly trampled in the stampede of animated high horses, and I welcome that because I really did enjoy those episodes. They're definitely more than what they seem to be on the surface, and I'll pay anyone that can make me feel something in this life. With all that being said, these 14 episodes instead of 16 for the second opening. Can you believe that? With these 14, I had more problems for sure. I always struggle with how to format these videos because my reviews are never unending praise or complete bitter dismissal unless something's like really bad. But if I lead with the stuff that didn't work for me and then talk about that, some people get mad that I don't like the show without ever hearing the praise I have lined up for it. Or if I start with the good and then move on to the less enjoyable elements, some people accuse me of looking for a reason to dislike the show or trying too hard to be different. What am I even saying? People upset on the internet. Yeah, more news at 11. I guess this train of thought stems in the fact that I don't want people to get it twisted here. I still did enjoy the second half of this season. I still do like this show. But you can watch something and see its flaws and have your own personal problems with it and still enjoy it. Okay, now that I've winded my way into a nice little secure corner with all of my defenses up, let's start. Wait, if people were mad at me, I would get more comments and YouTube would push my video more and I would make more money. Wait! Frieren, I'm happy to report, stays on target with the story's energy, which was my favorite part of the entire thing. The lovely, slow atmosphere of taking their time and enjoying things. And not just that, but stopping to enjoy things, to really appreciate the situations you're in and the people around you, and the effect you have on those people and the effect those people have on you and your life. And I know the show can't be just that, even though that is a big idea to explore, because whether I like it or not, this is still an anime about magical elves and monsters, and those elements of the show demand the show also be about magic and fighting demons and being a badass hero. The show never fooled me. I knew all of that stuff was going to come around after the demons and the big fights involved with that. But there was a lot of stuff that the show hadn't played around with much yet, pretty normal anime tropes, that I think it only executes on a pretty normal anime level, which is of course much less well executed than the other elements of this show. So over 3/4 of this chunk of 12 episodes takes place at the first class mage examinations. The group needs to get this certification because they want to go into the northern lands, and heaven is at the northernmost point of the continent. And the government, or the powers that be, whoever's running the show, says you're not allowed into the northern lands unless you have a first class mage with you because it's super dangerous up there. Or if you live up there already, because Verbal is from there, right? Maybe each town has a first class mage up there to defend them. Anyway, this test is quite involved and is taken in 3 stages. So yeah, it takes a lot of screen time to complete, meaning that our characters are in one place around the same people and have very serious goals to complete for the entire back half of the season, which is a giant departure from what the show has been like so far. All the parts that I really adored are put on the back burner for a lot of sitting around and wondering mostly. Well, wondering and wandering is a good way to put it. The lion's share of the show this time around is dedicated to new secondary characters, some of which can be pretty fun and interesting, and others don't ever get to the point of being grating or anything, but can feel a little less dense. Like there's less to them. This guy's name is Land, and that name is appropriate because he's about as interesting as a rock. He talks like this and never emotes. Yeah, but in German, Land means, yeah, okay, whatever, man. Oh, you're telling me the murderous super baddie is in love with the plain-looking anime boy with no personality or redeemable character traits? Oh, do go on. I'm mostly just being a dick. Most of the new characters that are introduced, I like the 2 bratty younger girls that hate each other so much, but they actually love each other. It kind of falls into my hated anime trope of characters only having the one joke and just embodying it, and it's even rougher because they have to split the same joke between them, but they also have the benefit of being paired with Frieren. And because of this, their one joke and their dynamic of being so immature is a pretty fun juxtaposition to Frieren's usual gang, which always has Fern, who shares her temperament nearly exactly in most situations, and Stark, who was much more animated, but still usually just a pretty regular dude. Frieren having these 2 girls to deal with and sort of teach along the way is a fun change up to what we're used to, and I found myself really liking it to start out. But as the first challenge goes on, the show really becomes more about the challenge and all of its challengers more than it is about Frieren and Fern. Fern feels like she's barely even depicted in the first challenge, and it's more than just a few episodes. Instead, we spend a lot of time focusing on the other mages like Denkin and Verbal and Ubel, who, what do you mean I just listed in the order of the most interesting to least interesting? There's no proof of that. I like the little trick the show pulls in the first trial. You think because all these other mages are against our two main characters, they're going to be evil or at least have a really mean streak. And the first time you encounter nearly all of them, you really do get that idea. Each time you run into them, they're smirking or being violent or doing something underhanded, and that tricks you into thinking that nearly everyone who is taking this first-class mage exam is in it just for the power and prestige and will do anything to get it. You make the assumption the show is doing what many other animes would do, or in the past already have done. Make it easy to root against the enemy in the challenge, because in the real world, morally, they would be an enemy to the main characters, or any reasonable person. But these characters aren't actually these villainous caricatures. They're just powerful mages that when we first meet them are in a very serious competition in which violence and intimidation is a very valid and basically implied strategy by the proctor and rules of the game. They're not evil, they're just competing, and the scenes where we rejoin them and learn more about them and their mindsets behind the violence or reasons to want to be a great mage slowly breaks down the prejudices you instantly have for them because they look like an anime villain, or hold themselves and speak like an anime villain, until when we finally get to the second part of the exam, you're not actively rooting against any of them. And that's not just because the second part of the exam calls for them to work together as one giant team to have the best chance. You're not rooting against them anymore, or maybe actively rooting for them, because the show does such a good job of breaking down those defenses you have up towards them to start, which is kind of a hack to the human brain, right? Everyone loves redemption arcs in media because someone going from good to even more good is one thing, right? You can appreciate that, but if someone goes from bad to good, makes a giant change that you can see and appreciate, your brain is just like, wow, incredible, they're so much better than the other characters that were already good because just look at how much they've changed. And the show does like 5 mini versions of that feeling across a handful of episodes because it tricks you. I thought that was really cool. That being said, they're not all great. Like, this guy may have been the most dickheaded, and sure, he fixed Fern's staff, but yeah, I don't like this guy. And his name is... I found the trials to be a bit mundane for my taste. I like the idea of capturing the Uber Sparrow. Seemed like it would really welcome some out-of-the-box thinking. And the way Frieren catches hers is good. I thought that was clever, but all the other capturings are either off-screen or just have to do a spell that locks whatever the caster is looking at in place. Didn't love that. It seemed like the task of catching a hyper-vigilant bird that can break the sound barrier would be a challenge for a first-rate mage, and we would see a whole load of different magic to attempt to do it, or at least a few different ways of actually doing it. New and interesting spells that could accomplish such a feat. But it almost feels like I'm the exam proctor and I'm looking down at the playing field, and then I have to look at Serie out of the corner of my eye and kick myself like, man, I didn't realize they had the super busted ass lock something play spell. Shit. So because of that spell, the first exam by and large actually turns into a series of battles between glorious bird havers and pitiful, dirty, birdless peasants, which I thought was cool at first. Even though fighting amongst each other wasn't outlined at the start, the rules are just whoever has a bird at the end wins, so violence is expected, which is where one of my biggest problems with these episodes comes from. And if you've watched my videos before, it's one you're familiar with, but it actually has a new twist on it as well. Last video I got comments about my line about how I think it would be a massive downgrade for a show like this if it devolved into just shooting a bunch of lasers, and those comments largely boiled down to people pulling on the neck hole of their shirt and looking at the back half of the season with concern. And let's be fair, it doesn't devolve into laser shooting competitions, and when it does, it's appropriately short and sweet or filled with some really crazy animation. Side note, do you guys think they've reached the limit with hit effects in anime yet? Just the pure spectacle of it in anime in general, not just this? Because sometimes it feels like, okay, a big attack is going off, let's give it 5 to 10 full seconds of it either being conjured or connecting, and we gotta make it look like the most fucked up apocalyptic black hole quasar, screen warping blur and smudge effects everywhere. We have to make it look like actual God from the real world is smiting the TV screen. And that's not a critique, by the way. I fucking love drooling and looking at insane colors and effects. There's no sarcasm to that statement. It just feels like, holy fuck, where can they go from this sometimes? So back on point, despite not devolving into laser shooting competitions, the show does devolve into some pretty standard anime battling, which I can't say I'm surprised to see, but the sheer volume of it made these few episodes a bit of a slog for me. There's a lot of standing there and watching and waiting and thinking to themselves about how the fight is going, all the stuff that you've heard me complain about before about fight scenes not actually being fight scenes. But with Frieren, there's actually an additional problem that bugs me. With all of the fights being completely based around the magic system, which on a surface level is a dictionary definition of magic magic as they come. A wizard points a stick at something and then something otherworldly happens. I can't find myself buying into fight scenes very much because of the lack of physicality. A lot of them are just people blocking magical attacks with their defensive magic, and then the characters thinking about how much mana each one of them has left. And that's much of what the action boils down to: who has or can retain more mana over time while attacking and defending. And unfortunately, that style of writing a magic system reduces down to a lot of people standing in place, casting a spell, and then defending against the spell while they think of a strategy to cast a new spell in a creative way to actually win. And I gotta be honest with you, I just don't find that very interesting. It doesn't feel like much of a fight when there isn't any actual fighting. People only get worn down in the sense of their mana pool being depleted, and me as a viewer, I don't have any reference to be able to tell at a glance how the fight is going in that respect. The characters literally need to think to themselves, or else I wouldn't know how the fight was going. When there's physicality to a fight, you can tell when someone lands a blow and how hard it hits. You can feel the impact, and from how the other character takes it, you can see how well they're holding up in the fight. This very fundamental rule of how combat works on a storytelling level is lost in this system. You can't feel mages getting tired. You can tell other mages can clearly tell how the fight is progressing, but I'm not a mage. I don't have this intel, which makes the fight seem less like heart-pounding, edge-of-your-seat moments that could go either way, and more like you're waiting to be told how the fight is playing out and will end, rather than getting to witness it yourself. And when it was just a couple big combat-centered episodes of the show from the first half of the season, that was fine. I think even at some point I said I don't mind the magic just being this ill-defined pool of magical power that everyone has enough of for them to win or lose whenever the story calls for it. When those were the rules for a few fights all happening at the same time with some really cool spectacle, I could discount it. It didn't seem like a major problem to me at the time, because really we were just still getting into the world. And even when those fights slowed down for dialogue, a lot of it was still very interestingly story-driven as well. But here, in the mage exams, it seems like this would really be the time to give the audience some insight on how your powers and mana reserves work, or give them some visual identifier on what's happening on screen. If you're focusing on the combat and the magic more, I think it demands it be more readily accessible for the viewer to take in those scenes. You're in the first class mage examination, you'd think somewhere along the line Denkin would think to himself about how, I don't know, one of the mage's mana reserves are running low, and thus they won't be able to use their more impressive spells, and thus will have to get scrappier or use less powerful magic. There's actually a great example of what I'm talking about that's actually in the show. It's when Levine threatens, because, oh, you don't know, the human body is actually 100% water, and then explains that while that is true, magic is based on imagination and knowledge. So even though Lavine's whole trick is turning water into ice, because she can't visualize a person being mostly water, her magic can't effectively freeze it. It comes down to visualization and imagination, and I think that's a great limit to put on the magic system, because that implies that, and I know this isn't a perfect example because I still don't think it would work, but like, what if a doctor had these same ice magic skills and wanted to freeze you, or a butcher? Maybe they still wouldn't be able to do it because it's just nearly an impossible thing to visualize, but they'd still be more likely to be able to, I reckon. I think that's an awesome limitation and rule. It keeps things from getting utterly ridiculous through people pushing logic of simple magics, and still means characters can be super creative with it. Perfect, they nailed it. Or like when Ubel has the spell that can cut through literally anything as long as she can convince herself that it can. Which means that if she was completely confident that it could cut through anything, it could, but her own mind stops her from cutting through magical defenses because they're designed to stop it. She believes they can stop it. If someone was teaching her that spell and told her it could cut through anything no matter what, left out the believing it part, and she just accepted that as fact, she'd be an unstoppable monster. But she doesn't believe it can do that, so it can't. Great limitation. So it's disappointing when I realize that that thinking is in place with the magic system, but then I look at the fights and know how creative it could be, and sometimes it feels like they're nearly turn-based. People just lobbing rocks and ice at each other, and then hexagons appearing to block them, and then it happens the other way, and everyone's just thinking about how much mana they have left. It's sort of like Yu-Gi-Oh, but this is supposed to be a fight rather than cribbage with cryptids. Like, would you call Yugi versus Kaiba a fight? This problem extends into the second phase of the examination as well, in the labyrinth, which, by the way, why even make it a labyrinth if no one's gonna get confused or get lost? To break up all the groups so they can all have their own little skirmishes before they all meet up and work together at the end? Alright, fair enough. I do have to admit something I like about the fight system that's brought up more in the second challenge, and that is that styles make fights. Though I think it's pretty underexplored. Ubel Omni-Slash technique can defeat Sense's crazy magic-imbued hair because, in her mind, no matter how much stronger Doppel Sense must be compared to her, Doppel Sense sequences attacks with her hair, and hair is something that gets cut all the time. Boom, it's over before it even began. Nice, cool. Some mages are just uniquely skilled in ways that could be a real handful for others. That's great, and it was cool hearing that each of the mages actually think about this sort of thing to themselves. I feel like we only got the Cliff Notes version of those fights though, and I hope going forward different styles and skill sets can clash and have it be a really fun, dynamic fight, rather than what we got in the majority of the back half of the season. And I have to be fair here, the animation and the fight choreo really does go insane sometimes, but with how much of these episodes are based on combat, I don't think it's nearly enough. So that was a lot of critiquing, I know, but you're still with me, right? Show's still good, it's still good. So let's get a little palate cleanser and talk about the opening, yeah? It'll be good because I actually like this one better than the first one. I try to be this debonair, artsy guy. You can tell by my vocabulary and word choice, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, if an opening has a song I like, it just gets a pass, man. What do you want? I'm a big hairless ape at the end of the day. Things sound good, me like. Why everyone going left all the time? Visually, this one shares a lot of the style of the previous opening. All right, let me break out the pretentious chops here. One sec. You can see here that Frieren only gets flashes of the people currently in her life, which is probably how she feels being so long-lived. These people really do only appear in her life for flashes. However, they're always depicted in facing her or facing the camera, because despite how brief these interactions may seem, they are still the people currently in her life. To contrast this, all of the people Frieren knew long in the past are turned away from her, never looking at her. Frieren's time with them has passed. They're pictured leaving her. Huh? Not bad, right? And then we get a series of honestly rather unimpressive shots of the expanded cast for these episodes. Basic shots of most of the other important mages. Really, this part of the opening is really saved by the song. It's still very nice. But I still think it fits with the idea I have for the opening, these people being briefly important. But that doesn't mean they're only slightly important. And we close with finally seeing Frieren's previous party, which quickly fade transitions into our new friends. I think meaning that even though that time has passed and Frieren is making more of this journey, that old journey is still very much important, no matter how far away her friends from back then feel. There's even, I feel, continuations from the last opening. To start the last opening, Frieren is pictured asleep, as if she wasn't even really present before, and is only awoken for her new adventure. In this one, Frieren is much more active and is seen participating a lot and is actively smiling, which she does a lot more in these episodes as well, actually. If I was keeping a secret tier list for all these openings, and I swear I'm not, this one would be pretty up there. I like it pretty darn good. I think among all the new characters introduced to the story, the biggest one has to be Serie. Am I saying that right? Serie? Some people seem to say it with a Z, I don't know. So Serie is the greatest mage of all. She knows all spells and doesn't mind everyone revering her for it. She is built up as the best there is and maybe the best there ever was. And there's only a stray line here or there that may hint at the others thinking that Frieren may be on her level, as well as I suppose the fact that Frieren broke her barrier when all the other highly ranked mages said it was impossible for anyone but Serie. And Serie is pretty blatantly the opposite of Frieren in all regards. She's smug and happy to accept the adoring eyes of those who respect her power. She hoards magic atop her throne, giving out a spell here and there to those she deems worthy. It feels like her idea of power and respect simply comes from the idea of being skilled in magic, so she learned everything she ever could. And because she's been the greatest for so long, it seems an ego or an air of bitterness has taken hold of her. Way in the past, when Frieren and Serie both learned of the oncoming age of magic, the boom in human mages that would come forth because of Flama's efforts, Serie seemed perturbed, almost insulted that the everyday human could have access to knowledge that she herself held dear. And being unable to do anything to stop it, I suppose that led her to become the leader of the mages, so she could effectively gatekeep anyone away from claiming they are an excellent mage if they do not meet the standards of respect she seems to demand that mages have for their craft. At least that's what I figure. Frieren, in a way, is copying Serie. She's trying to find interesting new spells to learn, but it doesn't feel like she's doing it just for the sake of doing it. She's interested to see what she can find and what she's able to do. The way the show handles Serie is interesting. If you were to look at both of the openings, you would guess that she would be the villain of the show. She was the menacing looking elf from the first opening that didn't even show up in those first 16 episodes. And because of that, I'm sort of expecting it to turn that way. It would make perfect sense. Basically another Frieren with different goals and a different mindset, supposedly the greatest mage of all time. But from where we sit right now, she doesn't seem like a villain. She just seems a bit cocky and annoyed. Certainly more emotive than Frieren, but still not as much as you'd expect out of a human. We haven't seen a whole lot of her yet, but she'll certainly return, and I imagine the differences between her and Frieren will be cause for some actual conflict. So the characters have moved on, and with their new certification that Fern received, will be able to continue their journeys. So we're leaving all these new characters behind and focusing in on the main lot again, which I'm thankful for. I gotta admit, I was pretty surprised when Zion left and he just stayed gone. I thought he'd be gone for an episode or two and then find his way back. That's really a shame. I liked him. I thought he was alright. Then again though, they've only really been on the one certification adventure since he's been gone, so maybe there's still room for him to come back and be a classic staple. The challenge set up to this arc really left our characters away from each other for a long time. The first half, basically, not even Fern and Frieren are together. And outside of an episode between each stage of the exams, Stark is entirely absent from the show, which I thought was a real shame. I like when these characters are together and are just feeling feelings around each other. It's really lovely. So the team being split up for most of it was a negative for me. Even though I found most of the new characters to range from likable to passable, it's still no low-stakes adventuring with the fam, which made the quick episodes where they were all together all the sweeter. And in those episodes, we got to learn more about the other mages while they aren't in such a high-stakes scenario, which I thought was also great. Very effective in fleshing them out as well. And not only that, we learned that there's something that Frieren hates even more than demons, and that thing is cows. I know Stark doesn't have anything to do while the girls are completing their exams, and cutting away from those events could be pretty jarring considering how important they are, but I could have used maybe a scene with him here or there, a fun little solo story maybe to break up the episodes a bit. Man, I was hoping to see more of the Fern and Stark romance too. I think the most important thing in the show has persisted, that being the bigger themes and overall atmosphere. Deeper thoughts and lessons on acceptance and the human experience are still strong and present throughout, despite the show focusing less on the feel. Ideas like being weak around someone who cares about you isn't really being weak, that's just being human. Or the continued exploration of the thought that being a hero isn't just about saving the world. If you're anyone's hero for a day, if you help someone in a way that means something to them, even if it doesn't mean anything to you, you're still doing real, meaningful, tangible good. And that's what a hero is. It doesn't matter the scale. Ideas and themes like this mean more to me than any mage certification or cool animation. And I think Frieren is on my side in that thinking, both the character and the show. And I hope now that we're on our way again, back on the road in season 2, we can get back into what I really think makes this show special. Patron shoutouts. If you want to see a brand new video from me ahead of the YouTube release, you can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link, as always, is in the description below the video. Biggest shoutouts of all go to my top patrons, A Flock of Plain Cakes, who was a unique win quote when they beat someone in a fight for every person on the planet. A2AX Phoenix, who was the first, and I mean the very first, to put the lime in the coconut. Anthony Collins, who learned how to throat sing from a man on top of a mountain in Mongolia, and now he can summon wild horses on a whim. Insomnite, who actually got that name because they have a sword that if it cuts you, you will never sleep again. Creffin, who ran out of people to arm wrestle, so they've moved on to the Animal Kingdom. They've got a match lined up with an alligator's bottom jaw next week. Midnight Balsams, who flipped a coin and it landed on its side twice in a row, and now they're pretty sure everything since that day has been a dream. And Tater of Tots, who did push the boulder all the way up the hill. They don't know why that Sisyphus guy was doing all that whinging. And of course, my other fuck you money patrons, Blanco, Kevin Bartlett, Liquor Cause I Know, or Potato Stream, Saint Expedite, The Former Meaning of Life, The 1AM Party, Trendkill, and Whitrow. In my God Overanalyzers, Two Boots Are Beat, Ang, Andrew Watchert, Blade Dancer, Bunniverse, Carlo Wren, Danny Stevens, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Satan, Emma, Aaron Grace, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, John Warhammer, Kirill Magnus, Mac, Marshall Rather, Matthew Lang, Michael Fallon, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Nicholas Abbott, Oathkeeper 13, Peter Bayron, Philip Jindra, Rocket Mist, Ryan Maxwell, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Smarty Marty, Princess Useless Backwards, Super Snipper, That Blind Ginger, and some sort of bear face. I don't know. Next up, something new.